So first things first, looks like I forgot to close my parentheses. So close your parentheses. All right, we are going to spend the next 2 days on solving quadratics. So there are like 6 different ways to solve a quadratic. That's not true. There's 4 different ways to solve a quadratic. We're going to do 3 of the 4. The one we're skipping over is completing the square because I, and Miss Swati agrees, and if she agrees, then I'm right, hate completing the square. It's never going to be the most practical way to solve a quadratic. Quadratic formula will always be easier to remember and easier to execute. So just do that instead of completing the square. So today we're going to solve by factoring, and then we're also going to solve using square roots, which is what you do when you don't have a middle B term. So we're going to start with solving by factoring. If you still need help with factoring, get help during work time today. If you need me to help you with factoring, get help today. Because when we solve by factoring, what we do is we factor a polynomial completely, a quadratic completely. Once we've factored it, we're going to set each of those equal to 0 and solve. So this first one here, 4x squared minus 2x, I can factor so since it's just 2 terms and they both have an x, this one is just going to be factoring one term out. So I can pull out 2x here. Because if I pull out 2x, 4 divided by 2 leaves behind a 2 behind, leaves a 2 behind. X squared factor out x leaves an x behind. And then 2x divided by 2x is just 1. So this is minus 1 here. So in this one, I'm just factoring out a greatest common factor. Then we use this thing called the zero product principle. The zero product principle is that anything times 0 is 0. So that means if this equals 0, then 0 times this will be 0. Or if this equals 0, 0 times whatever this is will equal 0. So we have to set each of those factors equal to 0. So 2x equals 0, 2x minus 1 equals 0, and then we just solve both of these. So 2x equals 0, we'll just divide by 2 and get that x equals 0. And then this one, we can add 1 to both sides. We get 2x equals 1. Divide by our friend 2 and get that x equals 1/2. So a quadratic is always going to have 2 answers because it's in the second degree. It's a parabola, either this way or this way. And so it will cross your x-axis at 2 places. So you always have 2 answers. Any questions on this first one? Okay. Next one, we've got x squared minus 13x plus 36. If you have 3 terms and your first term is just x squared, all you need to do is find 2 numbers that multiply to 36, add to negative 13. So, numbers that multiply to 36 are 4 and 9. 4 plus 9 is 13, so if you make them both negative, then they'll add to negative 13. So our factors on this one are just going to be x minus 4 and x minus 9. Because negative 4 times negative 9 is positive 36. Negative 4 plus negative 9 is negative 13. Okay, then we just set each of those equal to 0. So x minus 4 equals 0, and x minus 9 equals 0. So x equals 4 or x equals 9. Okay, questions on those first two? Okay, here's where factoring went sideways for some of us. This next one, we've got 2x squared plus 7x equals 4. First thing that we have to do is we cannot factor something if it is not set equal to 0. So the first thing that we need to do is subtract over that 4 to the left side. So we're going to do minus 4 on both sides. And we'll now have 2x squared plus 7x minus 4 equals 0. Oh my god. My husband put that water bottle in the dishwasher, and when I got it out of the dishwasher, the straw wasn't open. And I was like, that's probably not going to be clean. It's full of soap. Ugh.
That stinks. This is the worst mukbang ever.
Okay, so 2x squared plus 7x minus 4. For this one, because we have a number in front of 2 here, we can't just find the numbers that multiply the last and add to the middle. We have to do that AC method that we did back in chapter P. So for our AC method, we use that little x. We find two numbers that multiply to a times c. So that's multiply to negative 8. And they need to add together to be 7. So it's going to be 1 and 8. And then we make the 1 negative so that the 8 adds together to be positive. So we're going to split into negative 1 and positive 8. Negative 8 came because it was my a times c. So with AC method, we find two numbers that multiply to AC, add to b. So we find that negative 1 and 8 multiply to negative 8, add to 7. And then this is the one where we would split up that middle term and then factor by grouping. So we now have 2x squared minus 1x plus 8x plus 4 equals 0. Okay, questions right now? Yes. It shouldn't have. You caught my mistake. Good work. So this should be minus 4. I would have realized that in like 2 seconds when I tried to factor by grouping and it didn't work. All right, so now we factor by grouping. So out of 2x squared and minus 1x, we can just pull out an x. So we're going to pull out an x. And that leaves behind 2x minus 1. Because I factor out the x. If I distribute it back in, it would be 2 times x times x. So that would be 2x squared. Negative 1 times x would be minus 1x. You good? All right. And then out of 8x plus minus 4, I can pull out a 4. And so then that would be 2x minus 1. Okay, then these guys match. So that's 2x minus 1. And then our GCFs that we pulled out are other two terms, our x and our 4. Once we get it factored, we can then set each of those factors equal to 0. So any questions about factoring before I do that? Okay, so 2x minus 1 equals 0, x plus 4 equals 0. So the reason why we set them next to 0, or set them equal to 0, is 0 times anything is 0. So for this one, we'll add 1 to both sides. 2x equals 1. Divide by 2. X is 1/2. For this one, we would just subtract 4 from both sides, and we get that x is negative 4. Okay. Questions, concerns, emotions, thoughts at the moment about factoring. Okay. Everything we just did is stuff that you guys have done so far this semester, except for set it equal to 0 and solve at the end. So make sure it's already set equal to 0 at the beginning. Factor, set each factor equal to 0 and solve. If you need help with factoring or with anything, get me as we're working through those. Your assignment has 10 problems today. Those are the first 5. Okay, other thing that we're doing today is solving when we can just use square roots. So sometimes we don't need to / can't factor things out, and we will be able to just solve it like a normal equation, and at some point just take the square root of both sides to get rid of our x squared. So for this first one here, we are going to start by getting x squared by itself. So the first thing that we need to do is add 15 to both sides. We get 3x squared equals 15. Then we will divide both sides by 3. We get x squared equals 5. At this point in our lives, we can take the square root of both sides of our equation. When we take the square root, we are going to have both a positive and a negative answer, because both x equals both positive and negative square root of 5, because a positive times positive will be positive and a negative times negative will be positive, will both work. So for this one, your answers would be positive square root of 5 and negative square root of 5. And I'm pretty sure, I actually don't remember off the top of my head, I'll look it up in a second, whether Math Excel wants it as plus or minus, or they might want it as square root of 5 and then negative square root of 5. I think that's how they want it, is they want you to list them with a comma in between. Okay, so that's the most basic form when we just have square roots on both sides. This next one is almost exactly the same, except we're going to get a negative under our square root. So for this next one, we subtract 25 from both sides. We get 9x squared equals negative 25. And then we divide both sides by 9. We get x squared equals negative 25 over 9. And that doesn't divide out evenly right now, but also they're both perfect squares, so we're going to be able to simplify them here in a second. When we go to take the square root, take the square root of both sides. The square root and the square cancel each other out. But then we say, oh no, we can't take the square root of a negative number. The square root of a negative can just be I. The square root of negative 1 is just I. So this can be plus or minus I. And then we still have that 25 and that 9 under there. We'll be able to simplify those out now. So square root of 25 is just 5, and square root of 9 is just 3. So this can be 5/3 I. And then we put that coefficient in front now that we've got it simplified out. If it comes out of the square root, you do coefficient and then the I, and then if I still had like a square root, it would go after. Yeah. Hey, last one here is a little bit different because this -2 is inside what's being squared. So this one, what's being squared is already the only thing on the left side. So we can start by taking the square root of both sides. So I'm going to square root on the left, square root on the right. Square root and square cancel each other out. So I have x minus 2 equals, and then square root of 6 cannot be simplified any. So that's just going to be plus or minus square root of 6. Then we would add 2 to both sides to get x by itself. And instead of writing plus or minus square root of 6 plus 2, we're going to put the 2 first. And so our answer is going to be 2 plus or minus square root of 6. Okay. Any questions right now? Yes. That's what I'm logging in right now to check. I'm logging in right now to check to see whether you need to put, whether this is acceptable or you need to put 2 plus square root of 6 and 2 minus square root of 6. Let me go check. Checking now. Preview.
Wait, is that the end of the...
Yes. This is the answer, but this is what you need to put in Math Excel. The answer is yes, you need to write them separately. So this, and then on this one, it would be 5/3 I and -5/3 I. Thought I remembered that from last year, but it's been a year. All right. There's a few other iterations of things. Like we didn't see absolutely everything that can happen because like sometimes you have a negative and a square root here, and so then you would change it to I. If you need help, let me know. Get started working on your assignment now and get it done during class. So that way, if you do need help with something, you can get help now. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and stop this recording. Catch you in a minute. Bye, recording.